stress that I am not a scientist. Hunter is very correct. I have a full-time job during the day, but gosh, 6, 7 years ago, I grew up in Utah County when it was nothing but rural fields, and 6 or 7 years ago started wondering where the heck all the monarchs went, and started doing my own studies, and discovered that they need milkweed to survive. And so I actually ordered some on eBay and got started. And from there, started growing it and just studying more. And then it had just blossomed, and I've gotten involved with the state and with the Department of Corrections, who's growing milkweed for me. It's taken off like crazy. So hopefully we'll get some help to these guys. But I hope you just are here because you care about monarchs or the natural world, and I'm going to take you just through about a 45-minute presentation, and we'll save some time for some answers. And I'll go fairly quick because I'm covering a lot of things. So first of all, we'll talk about, the pretty significant decline of the monarch and the reasons why. Then we're going to go back to kind of a grade school level, and we'll go through the life cycle of the monarch and the various generations, and then that incredible migration that they do. And then our native milkweed. Utah has, gosh, 16 or 17 different species. You're going to be surprised when you see some of them. And then we'll just, some ways to get involved and answer your questions. So again, that'll be about 45 minutes worth, and then we'll open it up and answer away, because you guys definitely can grow milkweed up there. There's plenty of open space still. And we know that they go to that area. So first of all, I'm just going to give you here's the overview. Monarchs, when they refer to the monarchs of the East or the monarchs of the West, they're all the same. They are just separated. I'm going to turn on my little arrow here, so hopefully you can see it. But the population is really just separated by the Rocky Mountains, and that kind of determines, when it's time for migration. This big chunk of them, which is the majority of the monarchs, to be honest, end up heading down to central Mexico. And what's west of the Rockies visit a number of sites along the California coast. But some of ours we've proven actually go to Mexico as well. So just telling you that it is one and the same population. So with Western monarchs, back in the early 1980s, when we started doing counts, we had about 4.5 million monarchs west of the Rockies. And so that's the 7 states out here. They started declining significantly, even long before I got involved with them. And then look what happened just 2 years ago. 2 years, we took an 86% drop just from one year to the next. And so out west, we do it both east and west. They do an overwintering count, and we're down to less than 30,000 monarchs, which is getting to the critical stage. Pretty significant, and just the representation here shows you where we're at. It's a pretty sad, pretty dire situation. These are a couple of graphs. I'm not going to make you look through the whole thing, but this is tracking the western population on the left, and you can see there's some natural fluctuations during the years. You have crazy storms or droughts, or it's a great year and you bounce back a little. But you can see even on the east side, where they have 100 times more than what we have out west, the trend is not good. We got way down in the 2013 and 14, have done a little bouncing back, but it's not a good situation. This December, we actually will hear from the Fish and Game, or the Fish and Wildlife Agency, if they decide to list the monarch butterfly as an endangered or listed species. And that will change a lot of things in how, can people mow down milkweed. It's going to affect businesses and rights of way and utility corridors. A lot of things will change. So we're hoping. There's pros and cons both ways, but I won't waste your time going into it. Just know that there's a big decision coming. So the reasons that we have so much decline, and I think one of the biggest reasons is if you just look at the Summit County or Salt Lake County and west, what used to be open space and full of all sorts of agricultural fields and ditches where milkweed grew naturally just along all the ditch banks, are all subdivisions or freeways or commercial buildings. So we've just filled up the entire Salt Lake Valley. So where I can re-height a point of the mountain, good grief, there's going to be a monarch site in that area. The next thing that coincides with this decline is it was in the late 70s or early 80s also that Roundup hit the market. And so, great thing for the farmers. They could go and specifically kill the weeds, but not kill the corn. And they maxed out every square inch of their farmland so that, no milkweed was growing naturally along the edges. And so we've just really eliminated their food. Other things that are impacting it, climate change is significant, and that's another thing that is driving it. But and then just freak storms like this. So the majority of monarchs hang out in the high mountains of central Mexico for a couple of months during the winter, and they are all clinging together in these big pine trees. And this storm came through and wiped out about 30% of the population. This is 3 years ago on the eastern side. And so Mother Nature just has her way. And so there's got to be some resiliency built into every species. But man, we've got a lot of things working against these guys. So that's I'm going to leave the bad news behind and let's jump in and learn what we can do to make a difference. And so in order to do that, you kind of have to know about the monarch and their life cycle. So basically, the female must lay her egg, and this is her laying an egg underneath the bottom of the leaf on milkweed, and only milkweed, because if she lays that egg on any other plant, the little caterpillar will hatch and starve to death, because milkweed is the only plant that they can eat. And so monarchs have, 300 to 500 eggs. They flit around. They don't like dump a ton of eggs per plant. They'll lay one, and then they'll move to a different plant, and they try to beat the odds. And let's see, I think it might be the next slide. So these little eggs, so if you remember, we're going to back up a step. Milkweed is toxic. That white latex that's in it, that sap that drains from the milkweed, it's got some toxicity to it. And like, you don't want your kids to get their hands in it and get it in their eyes. But at the egg level, this hasn't consumed any milkweed, so these are still great little meals for ants and spiders and beetles. And so if a monarch lays 100 eggs, 95% of them are going to get eaten by other critters. So there's another factor working against them. But this is what it looks like up close. And you can actually get this with your iPhone. Kind of creamy colored, ridges up the side, football shaped, because there's also going to be a lot of dots on milkweed leaves that are the white sap that is leaked out when when there's a little break in the vein. But you got to look for the yellowish color, that creamy yellow, and then that very formal shape. It takes them 3 to 5 days to hatch. In that 3 to 5 days, every sort of creature is going to be hanging around like earwigs that hide out and wait to eat them. But here we have 3 eggs that I brought in from my yard. The day that they're going to hatch, the head goes dark, and so that's actually the head of the caterpillar. And I'm just trying to give you a sense of the size of these guys. So this is just hatched, and that's a standard sewing pin. So they're tiny little guys. Still, they haven't eaten milkweed. They're great food, so they get snatched up. But hopefully, we get enough of them through that we grow some. And so for the next 10 to 12 days, all these guys do is eat milkweed and poop, eat milkweed and poop. And when they're this little, they just eat the surface of the milkweed. They're not eating all the way through. So again, they're still not toxic yet. They may be eaten by birds and bugs. Again, here's size perspective. These guys are still in the 3 to 4 day old, that looks like. And the caterpillars, you remember caterpillars molt. Well, the monarch caterpillar goes through 5 moltings, and they call that, each stage is called an instar. So here's the newborn, a couple of days later, he's like this. Well, they grow 2,000% in the time that, it's about 10 to 12 days. So it's just a massive amount of milkweed they can consume. Now here's a leaf that I brought in, and I had, I combined some caterpillars on it just to give you a sense of how fast they can grow. So here's like the 1 day old. These might be 2 day old. These might be 3. So these are all under a week because once they get mature, 10, 12, 14 days old, it's going to probably be close to about a third of the length of that leaf. But as they get bigger, they start eating holes through the leaf. They eat the sap. They then become poisonous. If a bird eats it, the bird gets sick and throws up. Squirrels won't eat them. It's kind of amazing. And once they get through, they've made it, they're ready to do that 5th molt. They go somewhere to hang, and this happened to be, a mesh container I had. They'll attach to something and they want it to be secure. So they spin this silky little button that they attach to from the rear end, and they hang down in this J shape. And then within a day or two that they're going to create the chrysalis. And I always thought that they spun something around themselves, but in reality, it's the final molt. So here you have the caterpillar. You can see it starts to split. The outer skin just kind of crinkles up. This is as fragile as green jello, and it really is. If you touch it at this stage or it gets bumped, you're bumping DNA, and you're going to end up with a deformed butterfly. Once they've had a couple of hours and they've finished and it's hardened, sometimes they fall. They fall off a leaf or whatever they've attached to. You can actually hang them back up. But in that first couple of hours, you just don't want to bump anything, which is just crazy when you think that a critter just turned into green jello. And if you actually dissected that, it would just look like green jello. It's just so amazing. So here's, they'll attach anywhere, bottom of your patio chairs, the neighbor's fence. This one was up Immigration Canyon, just in the bright sun. And look at that amazing gold. Here is when I on occasion raise some because I go around and do a lot of presentations, and it's helpful to have them for people to see. But aren't these just jewel-like? They are pretty amazing. And again, this stage, so the caterpillar stage is probably 10 to 12 days. The chrysalis stage is another 10 days or so. And when it's getting ready to hatch or to emerge from its chrysalis, it'll go black. And then it goes totally transparent. And you can see, obviously, the monarch through it. Look at the gold on that. They still do not know the reason why that just shines like a jewel. So here, we can witness one actually emerging from the chrysalis. They call it eclose. But this is the miracle that goes from caterpillar to green jello to monarch origami. Let me tell you, if you ever get to see this up close, you'll be an addict for life. Look how furry. And if you could actually see it up closely, it's got a furry body, a furry head. It's fuzzy and spotted, and that's its little tongue that it uses, that it eats with. And this is what you get, is that its belly was so full of fluid, and as it hangs here over the next couple of hours, that fluid goes down and extends, the wings until they're out full size. And it takes, 24 to 36 hours really before they're hard enough and safe enough to be out there navigating the world. But here he is after I put him out on the butterfly bush. So that's just that crazy miracle that Mother Nature does for us. This just kind of sums up the whole thing and takes it through the life cycle. And in the heat of the summer, it can go fairly fast, like 3 weeks. But if you're in May or if you're in, September, the colder it is, the slower the process goes. So it's kind of fun to see this, just to get it in perspective, 3 to 5 days. And we have a caterpillar that's eating you can just see entire milkweed plants that are decimated, nothing's left but the stems. And then the chrysalis, again, if it's warm, it'll go fast. If it's colder, it's slower, but it's pretty incredible. And then another very cool aspect to these guys is the fact that there are 4 or 5 generations in total per year. One of those generations lived like 7 to 9 months, and the other generation, 3 to 5 weeks each. And so in order to give you a sense of that, let's just say that here in Salt Lake, we have a monarch that emerges from its chrysalis in the first week of September. And he knows because of the day length and the temperature that it's not optimal for him to keep moving north. So this guy decides that he's either going to cross the Sierra Nevada mountains and come find one of these spots that have been going for years and hangs out in California for the winter, or he actually somehow, we've had one tagged that made it to Vernal and headed down to Phoenix, so we know he was headed for Mexico. So yes, we actually tag monarchs in the migration season, and last year I had one recovered. It was so cool. August 31st, I tagged it in American Fork in a beautiful area, and January 3rd, somebody sent a picture of it back because it has a website and then a number that's attached to me, and it had been spotted in Pismo Beach, California. So he had, taken like 6 weeks to get from Salt Lake to Pismo Beach. He's hanging out for the winter. When it starts getting warm enough, that monarch then comes back in, into where it finds milkweed and dies. And so there's, a couple months getting there, couple months here or longer, a couple months getting back halfway to find milkweed, and there's the migrating generation dies, and then you have another generation, the first generation of the year that gets into Utah, and by then it's really close to mid-June, and they don't have a lot of drive to go further north, so we get generation 2, 3, and 4 here, and that's why the population now is just continuing to grow, and I'm getting in my yard, and we're seeing eggs all the time. I just think that's amazing. These guys are going 3,000 miles to get to Mexico, and then they don't go all the way back. Obviously, they come to find the first milkweed, they breed, and then they lay their eggs. But that's a 3,000-mile trip from Ontario, and I think ours is about 603 miles. This one went from Salt Lake to Pismo Beach, but look at what it crosses over. It's crazy, crazy. So you could actually do a road trip and go see them overwintering. And so we did. We've done it for between Christmas and New Year's for a few years. And you can go to Pacific Grove, which is right by Carmel, California, and they come to the same little neighborhood every single year. It is absolutely insane because remember, these guys have never been there before. It's 4 generations later. And they come to the same group of trees, of eucalyptus and Monterey pine, and they clump together to stay warm enough to survive the winter. But once it hits 55 degrees, they can fly, and so you'll get an explosion of orange. But let's just show you a couple of others. We drove to Pismo Beach. It looks just like dead leaves if it's not a bright sunny day. And then the sun hits it, and it just goes into a cloud. But then I spoiled myself, and I made the trip down to central Mexico, flew into Mexico City, took a bus 3 hours west, took a rickety little taxi another hour up into the mountain, and I stayed at this little B&B at the base of one of the reserves. And this is a pine tree that is so laden with monarchs that the boughs just hang down. And again, they're staying together to stay warm enough. These big pine trees, it's Oyamel firs, are big enough that they retain some heat, and it helped these guys survive the winter. But we were there on the day they hit 70, and this is what the skies were like. It's absolutely incredible. We actually took horses and went to almost 11,000 feet, and the heat, the sun had just come out, and it was warm enough, and so you see this river of monarchs that are coming out, and so our guides just said, get off the horses, just lay on your back and let's watch this. And you would not think that there was a shortage of monarchs when you're looking at this picture. But again, this is one of the biggest gathering points. Again, they come to the same place. There's 12 sites in Mexico, and only 4 of them are open to the public. And I got to go to 3 out of the 4. Very fun trip, very inexpensive if you know what you're doing. But there's another miracle to these crazy little guys that are struggling. Moving on to milkweed. We've got a lot of different varieties, a lot of different species in Utah. There's probably 100 that are in North America. This is the one that most people will recognize from ditch banks along agricultural areas. Super fragrant, super popular with pollinators. You know, people are starting to get it, that they need it, and are adding it back to the garden. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because there's a lot of them. And this is another one that does really well in Utah. It does require more water. It doesn't require being on a riverside. I have it actually planted in my flower garden out here in between shrubs, and it does just fine getting wet. It gets enough water in a normal, cycle, but they don't spread. It's kind of a shrub, another super fragrant, tiny little leaves. Very, very fine. You can actually buy this at some of the local nurseries. Here's another one that is along the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, and I'll bet you've got it in the Summit County area. They call it Antelope Horn. And actually, I've not seen this one in blossom yet. I've got some growing in my yard now, but it's yet to bloom. It needs to be in its second year. And then another one that I just love, and this picture is in my backyard, and this is one that doesn't spread. It just stays like this green shrub and has these stunning orange blossoms. You can also get it in yellow. This is native to southern Utah and just the absolutely most popular milkweed in Arizona. So monarchs love it down there. They don't tend to use it much here, but it's pretty, and they will eat it to survive. And then we have some kind of more unusual ones. But again, these are native. This one's called horsetail. And then just some ones that you would not even think were milkweed if you ran onto it. In the Moab area, there's one in the pink coral sand dunes. That's the only place it grows. Just crazy stuff. But this plant is the only thing that they can lay their eggs on, and they find it somehow. So just so you know, we've gathered about 12 out of 16 species we're growing. A friend and I are growing so that we can be able to have seeds to share with people and share everything for free, by the way. Just as important as the milkweed is to the caterpillar, once that monarch is an adult, it's a butterfly, it needs nectar to eat. So that's like bees, bees and hummingbirds. And so in the wild, things like, asters and bee balm, Rocky Mountain bee plant I've got in my garden for the first time, goldenrod that's out in the wild, Joe Pye weed is a tall plant that grows more in wetland areas and will just is a magnet to these guys. But thistle that we all hate is a huge nectar source for them, and they need that nectar from May through to September or October. So when you're adding things to your garden, if you want to attract monarchs, you really need to cover the whole season. But then you can also throw in, some non-native things and things like zinnias that they love. That will blossom all summer. And so again, equally important, you've got to have both. It takes both the milkweed and the nectar source. If any of you have tried growing milkweed from seed, it's kind of surprising. It's kind of tricky, and you wonder how Mother Nature does it. And so we're just going to do a quick run through here and give you some tips on it. Seed collection is actually starting in the next, it's probably in the next 3 weeks or so. We've got pods growing on most of the milkweed around here. And then I want to talk about, what do you want to do with it? How do you want to add it to your yard? And then watering, because milkweed is very drought tolerant after the first season. We'll show you that in a sec. But so you guys will recognize these pods that we see, and then if you wait too long, they explode and they're a mess. But this is that orange one. So these have about 250 seeds per pod. And these, the orange one has about 25, and a lot of the other ones I showed you are small and have about 25 seeds. So you can see what happens here is once they ripen, that seam splits, the seeds get to dry out, and then Mother Nature blows them away, the wind hits, and that's how she spreads it. Well, it's got to land perfectly to connect with dirt and have enough water that it'll catch and then it'll grow. And so we're going to trick it a little bit. But some tips. You want to wait until those seeds are brown before you remove that pod from the milkweed. Because if you pull it while they're still just whitish or even tan, they'll never ripen up. So you can peek, you can break into it a little bit to see, or you can, if you've got some in your neighborhood, you can slip an elastic band around it and stop it from, when it opens, stop it from exploding and blowing away. And if you ever, now you'll know if you're hiking and you see a milkweed pod that has a plastic band around it, because I run into that all the time. Because this is what happens if you wait. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, they're stunning, but again, the wind hits it, they blow all over, and not very many get ideal situations so that they grow. So we're going to show you how to cheat that. Oh, wait, milkweed arc. I just included that because I think they're so stunning. But, so we are going to mimic Mother Nature. And so what we do, we collect the seeds when they're ripe, put them in keep them dry, put them in the baggie, somewhere cool. And then if you want to start them indoors, I should say, do that process. And then come about February 1st, we take the seeds out, we sprinkle them on a damp paper towel, fold, just like sandwiches, fold the towel over, layer it up, and put them in baggies, and we seal them and stick them in the fridge for 30 to 60 days. And that cold and the moisture is helping break down those seeds because they're super, super thick seeds. And that's the reason if you just toss out a handful, that not, even if you had ideal situations, not all of those are going to germinate. So again, it's an easy process. Obviously, this is a big production because I usually do 20 to 30,000 seeds when I do this. And it works, because look what happens when you take it out, first week of April, so you can start them indoors. You take that bag out, and without opening it, just put it in a sunny spot, in a sunny window spot. A couple of days later, you open it up, and you're going to have like 95%, viable seeds. And from here, you can drop 3 to 4 in a cup and grow them for 6 weeks, and then plant them outside. Or you don't have to warm them up. You could, toss them outside, cover them with a little bit of dirt, 1/4 inch of dirt, and hope Mother Nature does her thing and there's enough water that they actually come up. But we have the best luck if we start them indoors. And again, every spring, other than this unusual year, like last year, I had 2,000 seedlings to give away. But this year with the virus, the Department of Corrections, the boys weren't able to grow it as much because we couldn't get on site. But it's just pretty cool to take it through the process. All right, those are the tubers in the background. So here's my home. I turned my dining room into, because it had such great windows. And for 5 of those years, I just filled it all up with solo cups, whatever cups I could find. And it turns out through trial and error, it really works best if you could put some of those, the biodegradable cups where you can plant the whole thing in together. You get 3 to 5 little sprouts, put that whole cup in the soil because they don't like having that root messed with. They send down one long tap root. It'll go 6 to 12 feet over a couple of years. And that's why they become drought tolerant. But so again, trial and error. I'd go I do now do biodegradable cups or peat cups, and they're then they need water. We get some pretty healthy ones. A friend of mine, he does these in his basement still. And I like to do 3 or 4 per cup, and then you have some mass because it takes a good 10 stems to get the attention of a monarch. This will give you more of an idea here. So what if you're interested in attracting them, there's lots of ways to do it. I'll show you in a slide or two. I took some dead space on the side of my yard and used it, but this is just out in my backyard. That's that tuberose of the butterfly weed. This is where I get my hair cut, and we're seeing that landscape architects are starting to include it in with flowers. And you may start noticing as you're driving around now that milkweed, people have added some milkweed. The monarch, you know, if you don't have a mass amount of milkweed, the monarchs will come for the flowers, and then the milkweed is there. They can lay the eggs. It's just a complete habitat for them. They just need a little bit of water source nearby, and that would make it ideal. Now, here's other people have just turned their parking strips into mass growths, which is pretty cool. But it's really however you want to incorporate it and into your yard. On the left here, and I live by Hogle Zoo in Salt Lake, is, you know, it was just dead space. Once we put that air conditioner there, I couldn't do anything. So I decided I took out half the sod. This is the first week of June, and I've got tiny, tiny little milkweed seedlings that are in. And then I also do it for Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County, and this is one of their parks. And we actually use an auger, and we, you know, treat it like it's an expensive flower, and you'll get what you put in. You get back what you put into it. But we compost them. We used an auger to dig it deep. You know, we've watered them. I'm just going to show you the difference a couple of weeks can make. And here's 30 days later. And I've got, you know, some the black-eyed Susans, Rebecca. I've got a little butterfly bush. You know, you mix flowers, and then I've got a water source over. This is another This is 60 days after I've planted, and I have a little saucer here that's a bony terracotta saucer with rocks in it, and that's my water source because I wanted to get to the certified Monarch way station, which means you have 10 stems of milkweed, you have flowers, you have waters, and you promise not to put any pesticides or, you know, any kind of sides in there, herbicides, pesticides. But in this first season, I had more than 70 eggs laid on this tiny little milkweed. It doesn't matter how big, they actually prefer the tiniest, freshest little sprouts as opposed to big, leathery leafed ones. This has been a huge success. It took over in 5 years, and I've already pulled out 200 stems this year, and I still have 200 in there. But you can go big or be smart. But there's lots of ways to do it. We have all sorts of sample diagrams where you can make pretty garden spots with it. Again, I do love this. Wish I had the video. I could walk you through it. I've now taken the whole space, and I am getting monarchs in the daily, which is pretty amazing with the low numbers. Again, they're not drought tolerant until they're more than a year old. Water them like they're a tomato plant. You know, keep them until they get established. They can sure dry out real quickly. We did 100 seedlings for Salt Lake City in one of their parks, and the guy forgot to turn the water onto it, and we lost the whole planting. So you just have to remember they do need one. Now what? So how you can help? Definitely go native milkweed and native nectar sources, or not. Just, I mean, a butterfly bush is not native in Utah. It's invasive in Oregon. I can't even imagine that. And they love it. It's like drugs. It's butterfly crack. Avoid using pesticides and herbicides. They recently, Xerces, the organization, did a test, and they pulled a milkweed plant and a wildflower that was in Central California, in that growing area where all of our agricultural stuff comes from. And the flower plant itself had 64 chemicals in it. And 40 of those were pesticides, and there was like 14 herbicides and then fungicides. And so that's what we're doing to our population. You also want to be sure and engage the next generation. And, you know, you can get involved and be a citizen scientist. And all that means is you're planting it into your yard, and maybe you track it and report seeing a monarch, or you report seeing milkweed in the wild. All of that, we're trying to get a survey of where we have milkweed in Utah, where we have breeding habitats, so that we know where to preserve it. It doesn't take much to be a citizen science, and that is one of the little monarchs that I tagged. You can imagine that flying all the way to California and somebody taking a picture and calling us. So this is, I had about a dozen of them. This was 3 or 4 years ago. They were all going to hatch at the same time. And you can see it's nothing but it's messy. They eat and poop. But I had all the kids come over that morning, and we kind of went through the little story of monarchs, and then every one of the kids got to help me tag and release a butterfly. And you really wonder if anybody's paying attention or if they got it. And I came home that week and I had this stuck to my front door. Dear Mrs. T, the Nelsons and I found a monarch butterfly that has not been tagged. We are keeping it in a bin to give to you. Please come to my house, and if we don't answer, please go to the Nelsons' house. Sincerely, Harris. So I went to the Nelsons, and those kids had that monarch in a bin covered with a quilt. It was going nowhere. And we opened the box up, and even just to make it even more perfect, one of the guys goes, look, it's a male. Because I taught him how to tell the difference between male and female, the two little dots that are on the back of the male. And so the kids got it, and now they're out there and they watch for them, and that's what I just mean about, engage the next generation, make sure that they know that these things exist, look up from your phone and see what's out there. This is, I am involved with the tagging study. Anybody can get involved with this through Southwest Monarch Study. This doesn't include last year where we had the one that we tagged in American Fork that made it to Pismo Beach. But you can see we've had some that we've had them in the past that made it to California. This is the guy that went to Vernal. There's one that made it to Phoenix. So there's some crossover. We have some that go, both directions. Very fun to get involved with. I'm just kind of organizing. There's areas around Utah Lake. There's Fish Springs National Wildlife Refuge way out west. And we go out there because there's a million of them out there in August. But we're just taking groups out with, adults running around with butterfly nets. It's pretty crazy. This was the site in American Fork. Tagged that guy, released it. Here's what they actually saw. Somebody in Pismo Beach caught this. It happened to be mating. There's a female under there. And here's the path that guy took. It took, what'd you say, 603 miles. We don't know, how long he'd been there. They go roughly 25 miles a day, but also over the Sierra Nevadas, through the winter. Very fun to do that. And so I'm headed back to that place in August, and we're going to tag them again. And then some great resources that you can get. I mean, we have, just to tell you, and I'll share this with Hunter, and she can send it out. I'll put all these in a link. But there is a Facebook group called Monarchs of the Wasatch, and we have 500 or 600 people in there that are, spotting milkweed and monarchs, and some of them are raising from eggs, which is fine. Raising monarchs from eggs is not a method of conservation, but it is a method to engage people. It's not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is milkweed and more nectar sources. But we share tips on if you want to try raising them, this is the best way to do it. I mean, rearing them in protective custody so that they don't get eaten by everything. But there's some great resources out there, and that's the thing that I've learned. Everything has come from these guys, and then just trial and error. And at this point, that's the end of my presentation, Hunter.
Sorry, I see that I'm muted. Awesome. All right. Let's see. So we have a couple of questions. Thank you, Rachel. That was awesome.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I love the photos of them coming out of the chrysalis. So cool.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Yeah. So impressive. Also the kids that saved the monarch for you to tag. I love it. Okay, so Ellen Shirk asked, how do you tag a monarch without getting scales on your hands?
Okay, so you're pretty careful. You get them from behind. So we net them, and that's tricky enough to learn. But you just grab them. Their wings are together. You grab them, and you don't, you're not moving it around a lot. So you get a good hold. And then it's helpful if you have somebody with you. Otherwise, you have to use your other hand to pull the tag off the paper. And then you can see in this photo, they have to go in that dorsal cell right there, or it's going to throw the flight off. And so you really, and it's super sticky, it's super light. And so if you touch, it's stuck. But not a lot of cells, not a lot of the scales come off on your hands if you're just holding it. But we put that on, you hold it for 3 seconds, and you release it. Honest to God, they fly like birds. They're just gone. So you're not doing a lot of handling. It's just that one pinch, and then you're holding the sticker in place.
That's so cool. I love it. Shira asks, she is in Southern California, and she wonders if you have any suggestions for milkweed there.
Oh my gosh, there is a website that we just are part of, and it is westernmonarchadvocates.com, and it has all the 7 states. I'm not sure if it has, look at the California page, and it may have linked to their native milkweeds, but I know we share some in common, like that showy milkweed. But
can you tell me that website one more time? I'm just going to pull it up and then I can share it.
It is westernmonarchadvocates.com. And if it's not .com, it's .org. But we just met for the first time in January. All of the 7 states, anybody that was interested met. So the guys came out from Monarch Watch. The founder of Xerces was there, and we met in Carmel for a 3-day conference to figure out what we can do to keep them, because we're at the point where we're almost not going to have monarchs west of the Rockies. So anything you guys can do to help would be awesome.
Great. I just put that website in the chat, and I'll also include it in the follow-up email with all of the resources for everyone.
And there's also there is a Utah page specific where we put how to ID monarchs, how to ID native milkweed, and that if you just do the bit.ly, and then it's monarchs in Utah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll pull that one up as well. Let me ask you the next question. How do you tell the difference between a male and a female?
And I wish, I'm going to go back and see if I can get, well, okay, so if this guy wasn't, I'm going to try to find a better picture. Okay, this isn't going to show it well, but if this guy had his wings, this is a male. And the reason I can see this little, there's kind of a dot. And if it was open for you looking from behind, those are a hormone spot that the males have right on that big vein, and there's one on either side of their abdomen down towards their tail. The females don't have that. Their veins tend to be thicker, and the males have a very obvious 2 black dots on those lower back wings. And I don't know that I have. Sorry guys, I don't know that I have.
We could probably throw a photo into the follow-up as well if you want.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Nicholas is asking if you know anything about the genetic diversity in monarchs.
Only that they've discovered that they are not a separate species, east and west. It is one and the same. North America has the majority of the monarchs in the world, but they have gone elsewhere, like they have in New Zealand, they have them in Australia. And I'm not a scientist, but I do know just that we are one population here in the US, far from a scientist. Just kind of a crazy monarch lady.
I love it. I think it's awesome. I like that you've got all your butterfly stuff behind you, ready to go. Okay, here's one from Sean. He says, what happened in 1998? He said, I think that was the year to cause the drastic drop in population. Like, was it something specific or?
And it's hard. So even 2 years ago, we still don't know quite what happened, although it's now we think that, I'm going to go back to those 2 slides on the bad news. We do know that what happened here is that it warmed up too fast. So there's so much that affects this. So picture that, the monarchs are starting to come in from the California coast, and it's so warm that they just move inland too fast. and there's not enough milkweed for them, you know, or opposed to a year that is a good temperature that stays cool, that would keep them closer to their overwintering spot longer, or to that first early batch of milkweed, and let them start a generation there so that more are moving forward, if that makes sense. You know, you've got a bigger population coming forward. So we had a year where it got too warm and they came in too fast, and that is part of it, but not all of it. You know, drought affects it. If you're talking 90, 80, oh, maybe you were thinking this past 2018, maybe, where it dropped so much. But again, there's so much that plays into it. Is the temperature, if there's a drought, if there is there's a lot to it. But we do know that we've gone up almost 2 degrees, and that is also affecting the life and how much we have.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I have a question from Ellen. Ellen says that she would love to visit a monarch way station, and are there any public ones that you know of?
Oh, absolutely. You can come to my house, and I'm happy to do that. Or the coolest one that I've got 3 or 4 of them. One of them is by This Is the Place Park, and there's a sign on it, so I could share that address with you. One of them is my side yard, and anybody is welcome to stop and look at that at any time. But in Salt Lake, in Sugar House, so I'm assuming she's in Utah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So my office is right next to the pond at Fairmont Park. So that is right in the heart of Sugar House. And they redid the pond 2 or 3 years ago. It was pretty scrungy. And now we've got natural little, they're just springs that come up out of the ground that are feeding this pond. And so Salt Lake City allowed me to put in a monarch way station there. So I started the milkweed there. And then we all got enthused about it, and we've turned it into the most incredible. It's going to be an entire pollinator garden, but it's definitely a certified monarch way station. But we now have 400 or 500 milkweed in there with more than 1,000 native wildflowers, and we're still in the process of growing it all. And we'll see some little fencing around. We're trying to keep the ducks from ruining it all, but it got eggs in its first season. So there's a giant monarch way station there. You know, again, to be a monarch way station, you need 10 stems of milkweed, flowers, some kind of water source. So it could be as small as somebody's, garden, or it can be as large as what we're doing at Fairmont Park in Salt Lake, which is phenomenal. It's the perfect setting. It has the water features. It's protected with trees so that they can hide in the trees if they need. It's the best. I would take a look at that. And I'm happy to meet up with anybody and walk, because my office is across the street, and I love excuses to go over there.
That's awesome. I can't wait to come and check that out. I didn't realize it was there. Okay, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm not missing any. So Lisa asked, have you ever used heat shocking to stratify the seeds? If so, was there a procedure that was specifically successful for you?
Nope, there is the shorter version. So where you do hot water, and then you could not, and you don't have to mess with the 30 to 60 days in the fridge. I actually have that instructions. So in our Facebook group, Monarchs of the Wasatch, there's a file section, and we have the instructions on how to stratify. And there's the short version, which is, I think, what you're referring to with the heat one. It's like 24 hours, and that works. We have the other instructions. We have the requirements for a way station, stuff for kids, a little map of how to make a schoolyard garden, all sorts of resources in there. But I haven't tried the heat one, but I do know it works. I think I just got in the routine of doing the fridge thing, because I could throw them all in together.
Awesome. I am copying the link to the Monarchs of Utah Facebook page now, and I will share that with everyone. And then I will grab you the next question. Okay. Make sure I get back to the right tab. All right. Sharing that here now. There you go. All right. Next question is Nicholas asks if there is a favorite color of flower that monarchs like.
There
That you've
is, and
noticed.
I only saw that recently in some article, and it seems to me that it was pinks and it wasn't purple, pinks and reds and something, and I have to research that again, but I know, I mean, they love sunflowers, any open face flower, they love sunflowers, but they love my purple butterfly bush. Um, they love the open face like echinacea, coneflowers, um, catmint, yarrow. But on the colors, I only recently saw that, and I thought, I don't have quite that color combination, but I'm not positive.
Nice. Okay, so Shira asked a question. I'm not sure exactly what she's asking. We might have to get some clarification, or you'll understand. What happens if the monarch gets onto the endangered species in December? Uh,
I know it's going to restrict how people and companies.
oh, onto the list. Got it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I understand now.
Yeah. Did we answer? I'm not positive. I know that there are big fines. It's like the bald eagle. You can't collect their feathers. You can't, or the grizzly that's endangered. We probably can still rear a few, but you won't be able to just mow down milkweed, and farmers can't. It's going to affect utility companies in a big way because they have big utility corridors that they're trying to engage with. But I'm not positive on that, and I sit in on a biweekly webinar, and I'm learning more. So if I learn more, I'll post it on the Facebook site. But I know that there are fines involved for messing with them.
Probably some increased regulations on what you can do near them and around them and to protect their habitat.
Yeah.
That would be good.
We actually created, I say we, but it's a Fish and Game. I got to participate in the Utah portion. For the Western U.S., they created a 50-year conservation plan for monarchs. It's pretty comprehensive, and I think that is also in our files section, that it's just about what each of us can do, from individual to company to, big landowners. But they've invested a lot of time in it.
That's awesome. What a great resource. All right, Brenda asked, is there a variety of milkweed that monarchs prefer? She says that she's had and saved milkweed in her yard for years, but never had any monarchs.
We do see that there's some preferences, but it's by region. So the orange beautiful one I love, I've never seen a monarch come to it. But if you live in Tucson, that's all they will go to. So here we see they really love that showy milkweed, the most common one that we see, ditch bank, and they especially love the little newer shoots because the monarch will land on the leaf and can determine how healthy it is. And you don't know if the monarch's coming to it, but really how often are we all standing out and watching all day long? They come down to nectar in the afternoons, and sometimes they come in the morning when it's cool to lay their eggs. But they do, so in the Salt Lake Valley, I see them preferring the showy milkweed, but they also, I have friends that say that they come to their swamp milkweed, and I have some of the more rare, or not as common varieties, they're not necessarily rare, like the horsetail milkweed, and they're laying eggs on that, and those leaves are as thin as a blade of grass, and that makes you wonder how they can survive. But so there do seem to be favorites, but again, it seems to be regional. But if you have showy milkweed and they're not coming to it, try something. And I do this just at the 1st of July, so you have enough time. If I have big, ugly milkweed, I mean, the blooms are kind of fading, cut those off at the ground. Don't pull them out, but cut them off so there's an inch or two left. And within a week or two, you're going to have brand new little shoots on that same plant. You're not generating another plant, but you're going to grow new, fresh milkweed that is so attractive to monarchs to lay eggs. So try cutting down some of the older, heavy, leathery leafed ones, and they will shoot up new tender shoots that monarchs will lay eggs on.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that, and I think that's a really cool way to get more to come to you. That would make sense. I mean, I don't like eating like lettuce when it's
right?
small.
And that's so if you
Considered
have big
gross.
clumps of milkweed in your yard, like we saw in some of those pictures, the monarchs can't get into the middle ones. So they look for the brand new little shoots that are around the edge. So I always start when I'm looking for eggs, I'm looking at the tiny ones from 2 inches tall to a foot. And you have to turn over every leaf and look, and it's kind of crazy work, but they go for the little tender ones.
That makes sense. I could get on that same train if I was a monarch. Brenda also asked how she can set up a way station.
You can either go directly to monarchwatch.org, and then I think the link is there just for way station registration, because that's the organization that does it nationally. And then the requirements again, 10 stems of milkweed. You've got to have nectar source. You have to have some kind of water, and that can even be a plastic saucer with river stones in it so that they can land on it. And then you get the certification, and you can get the sign, but you get to name it. And the one on the side of my house is Rachel's Home for Wayward Monarch. You can name them what you want, but that's what the registry has. So it's pretty easy. That's also on our Facebook group in the files section.
Awesome. I have two more questions. Are you okay with doing those?
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Sure.
awesome. Okay, great. So I have one more from, I think it's from Ellen, who said she's asking if we have viceroys here in Utah who mimic
Yes.
monarchs.
Yes, it is crazy. So I wish I had a picture handy that I could show you. There are two other butterflies that mimic monarchs in color, and they think that's because they're protected. The brightness of the caterpillar and the monarch lets predators know that they're poisonous, and I think there are even birds that are like that. But the viceroy is very similar to the monarch, and people in Cache Valley are seeing those. And the other one is the queen, and it's at first glance you don't see the difference. And the queen I actually netted by accident in American Forks, and we were seeing monarchs. In that site, I could actually turn 360 degrees and still have a monarch in sight. There were so many, and this is last year. The numbers are down. So if the environment's right, you get them. But the queen and the viceroy, we get both of them, and it could be a little confusing. But monarchs tend to be are the bigger of the three. Black, yellow, white dots around the edges. Google monarch lookalikes, and you'll see those three will come up together. Actually, we have it on the website. Oh, I think I even posted it in the Facebook group recently. I did a little pop quiz for everybody.
That's great. I love following that Facebook page. So many new things to learn every day. All right, last question. So Shira asked, did you say that there were times of the day that were more active than others? And also, do they sleep alone in groups? All kinds of questions.
They don't group up during the breeding season. As they start to migrate, they tend to get in clumps as they go down, but they are like other insects. I don't think it's really asleep. I think it's, what do they call it? There's a word for it, and I'm forgetting it. Is insects, I think, don't sleep. They just go into a low metabolism state. But I'm forgetting what the word is.
Is it torpor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other question was what times of day. So they do visit. They do go after nectar in the afternoons. Now, when it's really hot, you won't see them out there in the heat of the day. They'll come in the mornings and they'll come in the later afternoon. The same thing if you're looking at a bunch of milkweed and you're trying to see caterpillars. If it's really hot, the caterpillars are going to go down near the roots and hide out until it cools off, when they'll come back up and start eating. So, yeah, heat definitely affects them. Also, if it's colder than 55 degrees, they can't fly. So so I got to the end of the season once and had an egg hatch and took it through, and it finally emerged as a monarch on November 1st. And it's like, oh my God, I'm going to book a ticket to St. George on the St. George shuttle. And they wouldn't let me do it. I wait, I was going to pay for a ticket, but so I took it down to Milkweed Gardens and I put it on one of the flowers there, and I just prayed that it had a nice,
Made it.
yeah.
Oh, what a bummer that you would have like got it to catch up with the rest of
Let me tell you,
most
people
of its
drive
crew.
them down. I know people who have driven them down to St. George.
That's awesome. Is it just that they sometimes they don't hatch in time or they don't?
Yeah, or we get a really warm fall, and all of a sudden,
Oh,
so you're getting towards where the chrysalis is just going to, they're going to come out of the chrysalis, and all of a sudden fall hits,
right.
and
And
we
it's
get a
cold.
30-degree day, and these guys can't fly if it's got to be
Oh.
55. So you're kind of going, oh great, now what?
Yeah, how can I help you?
Culturally.
Oh man. Oh man. All right. Well, I think that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was awesome.
You're so welcome, and
I
I'll share
I
seeds, and I'll put bookmarks in if you want to get them out to people. We've got some fun bookmarks on how to create a monarch way station.
Yeah, so unfortunately we don't have plants, but with the seeds,
Yeah.
I'll send out the Qualtrics survey. In that will be an option for everyone to put in your information so that I can get in contact with you and set up a time for you to come pick those up from the Eco Center if you're interested in them. And then watch out for my email tomorrow. It usually takes a while for the recording to become available for me to download. So once I've done that, I'll share the link with you for how to access it. And so you'll probably get that email tomorrow evening. It just depends on when I can access the recording and how many people are also trying to upload the recordings at the same time. Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you,
You're
everyone, for
welcome.
joining us. Uh, we can't wait to see you at the next event. Hopefully, we'll see you in person soon, but until then, we'll keep doing these.
Got it. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for participating.
Thanks, Rachel. See you later.
Okay.